All right, strong jobs report. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Warren. It's really hard to put a negative spin on this. It was a good jobs report.
A recent report showing that the United States economy added more than 250,000 jobs under the Biden-Harris administration is so good that a Fox News host is publicly admitting that it's really hard to try to put a negative spin on it, even as many of their MAGA co-hosts are trying desperately to do just that. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. And I guess in a roundabout way, it's kind of a continuation of something that we touched on in a previous video. You know, previously I pointed out that political commentator Megyn Kelly is upset because recent polls showed that Vice President Harris is significantly cutting into Donald Trump's polling advantage with respect to the economy, which is something that Republicans have typically enjoyed. There's the perception spanning decades that they're just better on the economy, even though the macroeconomic indicators show pretty reliably that the economy performs better when Democrats are in power. Well, we continue to get additional evidence of that. A recent jobs report showing 250,000 jobs, 254,000 jobs to be more precise, were added under President Biden and Vice President Harris, and the unemployment rate is about 4%. So I'm going to play some of these clips. We'll unpack them together.
Guess what? David Barton is with us this morning. Great to have you here, David. All right, strong jobs report. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Warren. It's really hard to put a negative spin on this. It was a good jobs report. Yeah. The unemployment rate lower, the total jobs number higher. Because I'm a long-term, big picture macroeconomist, I'm always worried about the lower labor participation force. I want more people in the workforce. But as far as the percentage of people that are in the workforce and looking for a job, a good portion of them have one. It's pretty easy right now to hold a job, but at the end of the day, wages are what a lot of people are looking to, Ash, and real wages have kept up pretty good here as of late, so it's a good report.
Yeah, that's so funny, because of course, as you know, one of my favorite things is to watch Fox struggle to cope with positive economic news. And not that there hasn't been any negative economic news under the Biden-Harris administration, but for the most part, it has been pretty damn good. It's just an objective fact. The United States has handled COVID economically to a far greater extent than any of our peer nations, including China, I might add. We have just made a masterful soft landing between the management of the Biden-Harris administration and the Federal Reserve. We've just done far better than anyone who could potentially do so in our position. It's extraordinary. And the truth is that Fox would be celebrating this, shouting it from the rooftops if it had happened under a Republican president. Imagine a counterfactual where the COVID really broke out under a Democratic president. Obviously, they would not be inclined to give that president the benefit of the doubt. They would say, oh, come on, you're the commander in chief, you're head of state, you're head of government, you're supposed to be managing these crises, no matter how demanding. It doesn't matter that it's a once-in-a-century pandemic. It doesn't matter. You're supposed to do the job. And then if under a Republican president, we had this sort of masterful economic management, they would be praising him. But because the situation is reversed and COVID occurred under a Republican president, specifically Trump, and the masterful economic management has occurred under a Democrat, well, again, Fox is constantly looking for ways to downplay or to emphasize the negativity of a potentially good economic report. And so I'm going to play a couple of clips of Maria Bartiromo, who is a MAGA Fox News host leading a Republican pro-MAGA panel, again, looking for any possible excuse to downplay this September jobs report. So we're going to play these clips and unpack them together.
Well, Maria, I honestly don't think this is going to have very much of an impact, simply because the average American is living the economic reality of bidenomics every single day. You know, they have been living under the Biden-Harris administration for 3.5 years now. They don't really need these reports to understand that they are worse off today than they were 4 years ago. You know, the typical American family has seen their inflation-adjusted take-home pay fall by $3,600 on an annual basis. I mean, people are demonstrably worse off. I don't think the average American is really swayed one way or another by these reports. So I think from that standpoint, the impact is really irrelevant when it comes to voting.
Okay, but certainly investors are looking at the election as far as policy changes. These are completely different policy agendas.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And I think that's very clear when you look at, for example, stock returns based on when Trump has been ahead in the polls versus when Biden or now Harris has been ahead in the polls. And one of the really interesting things is that during those periods when Trump has been ahead, the market has rallied significantly stronger than the times when his opponents have been ahead. In fact, it's an order of magnitude different. And
so you see what they're doing? They say, and they offered no evidence for this, by the way, given that Kamala Harris has been generally in the lead against Trump, certainly for far more often than not, since she became the presumptive Democratic nominee. As a matter of fact, I'm not aware of a time in which Trump had a sustained advantage against Harris, either in national polling or in swing state polling. He's basically always been behind Harris since she stepped up to the plate. But they're doing the thing where it's like, okay, well, if there is good economic news, it's because Trump's in the lead in the polls, which is something that Trump and Larry Kudlow have been trying to peddle to the American people. And again, total contradiction to what the first analyst said in the first clip, which is that, yeah, these job numbers are great. People are employed. Unemployment is relatively low. If you want a job, you can get it. If you have a job, you're staying in it. And there's serious real wage gains. And this guy is saying, well, actually, no, there's no good news. This is just kind of esoteric nonsense. And also, again, the market, it's good, but that's because Trump is in the lead. And like when he's not in the lead, the market's, well, it's still good, but it's like less good than what it would be. Again, offers no citation for that whatsoever. So pure cope, right? Pure desperation coming from them. One more clip.
Sean, maybe this rally, Dow Industrial's up 170 points right now, has to do with the expectations that the Fed put is still in place, that the Fed is going to cut rates, and this report confirmed it because the jobs are low-paying jobs and government jobs.
That's true. But then on the other hand, why is a 10-year Treasury yield up at 3.95%?
Right,
it's
that I don't
hitting
know.
4%. Yeah. My goodness. Mortgage yields were supposed to fall when the Fed cut rates, and instead it seems as though mortgage yields are going to be moving higher. Yeah. So we're getting a confusing response by the market. I'm with Joe. I think the economy is slowing, and this is borne out by the this reliance on low-quality jobs to grow payrolls. If we hear from companies, they are much more cautious with hiring. As a matter of fact, we have a lot of uncertainty out there because of we don't know how the November 5th elections are going to play out. And until we get past the elections, I don't think we have a clear reading regarding what businesses plan to do.
Do you hear the stammer and stutter in his voice? It's so hard for him to deliver this bullshit because that's precisely what it is. Again, when positive economic news exists under Republican presidents, go back and watch their coverage of the economy during the first 3 years of the Trump administration. Anything positive which occurred was attributable to Trump and Republicans. Never mind the fact that Trump inherited a pretty good and fully recovered economy from the 2008, financial crisis, which was triggered under the Bush administration, right, which President Obama inherited and then spent 2 terms getting us out of. Never mind that Trump inherited a fully recovered economy that was firing on all cylinders. Obama gets none of the credit for that. We don't grade Trump, give Trump partial credit because he inherited those positive economic trends. It's all because of Trump and Republicans. Then, of course, during his 4th year in office, well, okay, sure, that happened while he was in office, but it was really, he had no responsibility. When are presidents responsible for the economy? Guys, you can't blame the president for the economy. Then President Biden inherits the COVID mess. And you would think, again, if they were being consistent and honest, okay, well, we didn't grade Trump harshly because of COVID. So we really can't grade President Biden harshly for COVID since he inherited a COVID economy and had to, exist in that context. No. All the charitability, all the generosity went away. And that's precisely what we're seeing now. Oh, the election's too close. We really can't look at these indicators. They really don't tell us anything. And the jobs that were gained, sure, government payroll jobs increased, but healthcare and, hospitality industries, they actually increased more by far than government jobs. But those don't count. We're just going to emphasize, the fact that the government is hiring more people. The dishonesty and the cherry picking is staggering from these Fox propagandists. It really is. A couple of other things to just kind of close this out. Pre-prime age native-born employment rate remains higher than foreign-born employment rate and higher than at any point pre-pandemic. So this is important because one of the things that you hear, I think J.D. Vance even mentioned it during his debate with Governor Walz, is that, all these new jobs are going to immigrants. I don't know, number one, why that would be a bad thing. Immigrants are also, they are here in the United States. They're working. Many of them are U.S. citizens. whatever, but it's also wrong, right? It's just wrong. Native-born employment rates and participation rates are extremely high. I also point out that jobs created. President Biden has created more jobs have been created under the Biden-Harris administration, many more jobs per month than under the Trump administration, even if you control for COVID. It's just simply the case, okay? And 2024 is not even over, okay? So average for Trump is 177,000 jobs per month, 271,000 for President Biden. David Doney, who's one of my favorites, he even makes his charts and tabulations accepting the ridiculous premise of MAGA. So when MAGA's like, well, those are COVID bounce back jobs, David Oney's like, you know what, fine. We'll cut off the pandemic recovery. We'll cut off the months from the pandemic recovery. And since the pandemic was fully recovered to pre-pandemic unemployment in 2022, he's like, okay, so from 2022 to 2024, President Biden has presided over nearly 271,000 jobs per month, almost 100,000 jobs on average greater per month than Trump, right? So even if we indulge in these ridiculous, gerrymandered standards, Biden still has a better jobs record than Trump. Also, despite the catastrophe of the COVID pandemic, wealth and income in the United States are up more than inflation since 2019. So net worth for the bottom percent 50 group, the S&P 500, net worth for the 50th, 90th percentile, GDP, nominal GDP, home prices, hourly wages, inflation, all of these things are being managed in a positive direction, truly. Employment's higher than any point under the Trump administration, okay? And actually prime labor force participation. That's the big one here, because this idea, well, sure, there are more jobs, but labor force participation is down. Well, the prime labor force participation, so the people whom you expect to work, the longest, like prime workers, their participation in the economy is higher than it ever was under Trump. It's like the highest, I think, since the first few years of President Bush, right? So like 2001, 2002, staggering. Unemployment rate has dropped yet again. So folks, the bottom line is this is positive economic news. It's constant, right? And unfortunately, there's a vibe session going on, not a recession, a vibe session where people's perceptions of their personal finances and even their state economy is wildly out of congruence with their perceptions of the national economy. We talked about polling about this months ago, where if you poll people, they're like, yeah, my personal situation is pretty good. What do you think your state economy is? Oh man, my state economy is pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty good here in XYZ state. What about the national economy? Oh my God. Man, we're on the verge of a recession, a global catastrophe. Yeah, we're on the verge of a stock market crash, the likes of which we've never seen. It's contradicted by the facts. Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize winning economist, he has done research into this too, like the partisan perceptions of the economy. And by the way, Democrats are guilty of this too, just not as much, just nowhere near as much, but still guilty of it, right? We tend to look at the economy differently when a member of the opposite party is in charge, but it's really bad for MAGA Republicans. So here's what I will assure you. God forbid Donald Trump wins the election. Let's say nothing else changes and all of the economic trends and trajectories under the Biden-Harris administration merely continue under the Trump administration. As soon as he is inaugurated, perceptions about the economy from Republicans and right-wing independents will change because their mind changes. Oh, a Republican's in charge. Yeah, everything is great. It's like a veil has been lifted. The reality is the macroeconomic metrics are what they are. The economy is doing well, certainly compared to any other country on earth by far. And this is thanks to the management of the Biden-Harris administration, many direct policies that they have implemented, also the management of the Federal Reserve and Chairman Jerome Powell. This has been a masterful soft landing of a post-COVID economy. And unfortunately, I don't think the Biden-Harris administration are going to get the credit they deserve. But since Kamala Harris is cutting into Donald Trump's advantage on the economy, maybe I'm wrong. And maybe by the time of the election, most people will realize, damn, all things considered, even though it wasn't perfect, the Biden-Harris administration did this pretty well. Maybe we should reward them with another term so that we don't put a Republican back in power and continue the modern American economic history of Republicans getting in office, triggering economic catastrophes, Democrats coming in, cleaning up the mess, but people are exhausted at that point and appoint a Republican again. Maybe we should just try continuing to give Democrats power and create a situation where we see what they can do when they don't have to clean up the mess left for them by a Republican. Food for thought. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.